All right. Welcome back to the Partnership Mastermind Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lavoie. If you spent time in the Shopify ecosystem, there's a name you've definitely seen at the top, and that's Domaine. And today's guest is a big reason why. I'm joined by Karolina Kondrat, Director of Partnerships at Domaine. Shopify is the number one agency by almost every meaningful metric. She's built partnerships inside global, high-growth agencies, and she's known for turning chaos into clear, repeatable revenue. We're going to break down how she's operationalized internal referrals across client teams, turned enablement into a scalable revenue engine, and kept Domaine at the top of every ISV's priority list without getting overwhelmed by the noise. Karolina, welcome to the show.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. What an intro. Very excited to be here.
Amazing. Well, look, we're going to get into some really fun topics, but we always start each episode off with 5 quick hitting questions, fun to get you kind of eased into the conversation and help our audience get to know you a bit better. Just the first thing that comes to mind. You ready for that?
Okay, let's do it.
All right, sweet. First question is, what's one tool you can't live without right now?
Oh, for me, it has to be Notion. That has really become sort of my second brain. If it's not in there, it really doesn't exist from my tasks, my notes, and everything else. It very much keeps me sane, honestly.
Amazing. Are you a stickler for kind of organizational kind of maturity within Notion? I've worked at some companies where everyone from the CEO has very strict demands with how Notion is kept. Are you in that category?
With my team, a little less so, to be honest. I'm like, so long as it's there and it makes sense, it works. For myself, I feel like I have my own systems that I've learned work for me and how I digest information. So yes and no, I'd say.
Fair enough. Love it. Cool. Second question. What is the most underrated skill for a partnership professional, in your opinion?
I would say, I think especially coming from a service partner perspective, would be internal selling and storytelling, I guess. Really, if you can't get your own internal cross-functional teams excited about a partner, I mean, good luck getting traction.
Yeah, love that. And we're certainly going to get into that later on in one of our segments. Cool. Next up is, if you think back to a specific partnership that you've been a part of building that taught you the most and helped you really level up as a partnership professional, is there one that comes to mind?
Yes, definitely. I don't want to play favorites, but the one that really comes to mind for that use case you said would be Klaviyo for myself, mainly just because when I started it was what was formerly Tomorrow at the time on the agency side. I went from filling out a form on their website of hey, I would like to partner with you, to now at Domain. They're really our biggest partner, bar Shopify.
Yeah, love that. Again, we'll get more into that, but I think that's a great one to double click on later. Second last one here is, what's one mistake you still see senior leaders making with respect to how they run their partnerships teams?
Yeah, the obvious one for me, I think, would be solely measuring just partner source revenue. I'd say that's one piece. It's an important piece, but I think if you're not looking at other metrics, whether it's influence, retention, or expansion, you're kind of flying blind looking at the holistic picture.
Yeah, I love that. And I loved in our interview prep talking about the difference between leading and lagging indicators, and how lagging indicators like revenue can be really helpful, but not so much a diagnostic proxy to drive real-time decision making, so to speak. So excited
Absolutely.
to get into that. Excited to get into that one as well. And then the last quick hitter is, if you weren't in partnerships, what would you be doing?
Oh, if I think about the time I transitioned into partnerships, I think if I didn't move into partnerships, I probably would have gone brand side in e-commerce and really kind of helping run day-to-day websites. I said not e-com answer. I'd love to be a sommelier in the south of Europe somewhere.
Amazing. Well, maybe that'll come down the line.
One day.
If you're busy conquering the world of agency. Sweet. All right, cool. Well, we're going to get into it now, and we're going to zoom out for a second to start this conversation. You have a really fascinating background, started in sales, moved into account management, and the next thing you know, you're running the Kylie Cosmetics account during Shopify's rocket ship phase. So would love to just start there. Can you take us back to that moment? What pulled you towards partnerships and made you, want to double down?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think going back to sort of that first initial role, really with the Shopify ecosystem, I don't really think I truly knew what e-commerce was, from a business perspective. I don't think I knew what Shopify was, but I had background in health and beauty previously, so I was very enamored by the Kylie Cosmetics brand at that time. So that was a lot of fun. I think I got to get super in the weeds. We were a very small team, both sides, brand side and agency side. Got to get very hands-on, I think, with really the specific technologies, both including Shopify. I was really a person unlocking and locking the site, helping change out banners. I even eventually got my hands on as a non-technical, non-engineering person of even like learning how to write some like very light like Ruby codes, coding and like Python scripts to like help run some promotions to help support our dev teams. Like they really taught me, but I kind of got to get very hands-on with our partners as well too, like helping to set up like our Klaviyo like pop-up flows or even like make some minor edits to like the Yotpo review widgets. Like got very weirdly hands-on because we were such a small team. So I think from there I got to kind of see what works, what doesn't, I think especially from a client brand perspective. So that was a lot of fun, I think, to really learn kind of by trial by fire. And then from there, I think also working in a like smaller agency at the time, I think anyone who's worked agency knows you end up wearing many different hats for startups in general. So from there, while I was very focused on the day-to-day account management, I also ended up supporting a bit on the biz dev, marketing, and then partnerships kind of by nature as well too, because I was being so hands-on on the client side with these partners. So helping to start manage those relationships. And then I really liked it, I think, because I realized it felt a little less transactional, I think, in like the
Right.
broader scope of just the day to day where, when you're working very client facing, it's a little bit of the client telling you what to do and you needed to do it yesterday versus partnerships felt like building a much like longer term relationship and it felt more two-sided. So I think when I had the opportunity to move into a different company and like really I lean into that full time, it felt like a little bit of a no-brainer for me at that time.
Yeah, I love that. Great breakdown of your background. And I hear this a lot, especially from people who maybe start in sales and then pivot into partnerships. They speak to, I'm a little bit fatigued by the transactional nature of it. Now, one question I'll give you to kind of go back on that is, I've actually hired a few AEs into partner manager type roles. I've seen mixed success where I've seen some, they come in and they know how to work a pipeline, they know how to manage a book of business, they know how to like navigate a funnel, so to speak, and they crush it. And then I've had others that I've either seen or hired myself where it's really a big struggle for them, right? Not waking up on a Monday and you just have 7 demos you have to do, right? A little bit less structured of a role, to use your words. So how would you kind of characterize the transferable skills, certainly from coming from a transactional account management type role to one into partnerships? What do you think helps? And then what do you think some of the plaguing challenges might be to ramp up?
Yeah, no, I think you really flagged, I think, what a lot of us see just like working in the ecosystem. I think coming from more of an account management background, I think a little bit of the difference with sales, maybe per se, is you do end up having to think fairly strategically. I think, especially in terms of like longevity and like retaining your client, you're always kind of considering of like
Right.
what's next, how do I continue to improve the relationship. And I think you end up having to also lead with a lot of empathy and a lot of people building skills in a way that's a bit different than sales because again it still ends up being a little bit longer term versus like a sales cycle. So I think that piece is really helpful, but I do think kind of what you were touching on a little bit as well too, the part that maybe I had to kind of also learn the hard way in sort of that transition is the I think being able to look at the bigger picture, take a step back, look at sort of like what is the long term like play here, and realizing it's not going to be like a quick like, hey, we're going to book a demo in a week and sign a contract the next week. Sort of like longer term strategically, and I think finding what are the KPIs to really measure against that, and figuring out, I guess, what works and what doesn't. But I
Yeah.
think it's that bigger picture play is sometimes maybe the one that people are missing.
Yeah, definitely. We just had Alexis from Chili Piper, their VP of partnerships, on recently for an interview, and one of the things he talked about was he came from like an SDR background and similar mindset, like the zooming out, having the patience to say, hey, you know what I'm going to do today or this week is not necessarily going to show up on my scoreboard this quarter or on this like quarterly quota cycle.
Yeah.
That's a really big challenge, especially as you scale in your career, because you're so focused on hitting your goals today or this month or this quarter, to earn your paycheck. So it is a really difficult skill, to your point, to kind of have the patience to, move 2 balls down the field. One ball that helps you hit your goals this quarter so you can keep your job and get your paychecks. And then the other ball down the field, which is more of that strategic to unlock bigger opportunities in the future. Does that kind of, resonate with how you describe that?
Oh, 100%. I think like patience is the key word there. And yeah, it is a fine
Right.
line of like, you do have to become, I think, a really strong internal advocate for yourself as well, too, of like, you're not necessarily going to see quick wins. I think, especially when you're like first stepping into a partner role. But again, it's a fine balance. Because of course, you still have your targets. You still have, quarterly, monthly specific KPIs. So you can't continue to just punt those out and be like, no, I promise it's going to come. But I think it is like kind of finding that balance and being able to advocate for yourself as well, too.
Well said. Well said. And we'll double click on that a little bit later. Now let's fast forward a bit and start talking about your first like, real challenge in partnerships, specifically your early Domain days, right? You're managing a mountain of partners, right? Agency chaos, so to speak. So first question here is, when did you realize that maybe some things that you were trying weren't working? And what was that first move you made to start fixing it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's around chaos is the right word if I'm thinking back to many years ago. But I think ultimately, first and foremost, the first mistake I made that felt very obvious was really trying to cast, I think, like too wide of a net. I mean, I definitely was like, great, I'm a new person in this role. I have some pretty lofty targets I need to hit as well too. And Domaine, what was Tomorrow at the time also too, had a really already good reputation and like amongst a core group of partners. So I did feel a need to like really, I guess, like engage and connect with everyone. And I think especially like looking at sort of the targets I was up against, I think I had a very simple mindset in terms of assuming that more partners would immediately mean more impact and obviously greater revenue impact as well too. So I spent a needless amount of time probably setting up meetings and sharing all these enablement materials about Domain and really trying to support everyone equally and really making myself available. I think without actually taking that step back and looking at who is actually going to be like who is actually driving results, quite frankly. So I feel like it was just very scattered energy and not a lot of good focus. So I think from there, really actually taking the time to audit that list and make some more strategic decisions based on the data in front of me is kind of how we rectify that moving forward.
Yeah, love that. Some really great breakdowns there. And for anyone listening, a key takeaway there is just, more partners doesn't equal more success. I think that is candidly a challenge when you're moving into your first biz dev role, and partnerships might be your first biz dev role, where you conflate activity level with productivity, right? Definitely not the same thing. But when you're younger, it's easier to kind of get fooled into that trap. So for anyone who's listening who might be feeling that and falling into that trap right now, what would you tell them when it comes to, they're suffering from spreading themselves too thin? What might you say to the folks in the audience who might be suffering from that might help them get on the right track? That helped you.
Yeah, I think like really focusing on like to actually taking like first of all tracking everything so you actually have data to like look at and pull from in terms of making more strategic decisions. And I think really just the value of prioritization. I think obviously like not every partner is going to be high impact and like that's okay, but I think ultimately like we're just kind of talking about, it's so much more important and more valuable to go deep with the right partners, and those are the ones who are really going to be aligned with your ICP, like your go to market goals and your other internal workflows and client support as well too, rather than like trying to spread yourself too thin and just maintain like dozens and dozens of really loosely engaged relationships.
Yeah, perfect segue into the next topic, and I certainly agree. And in the mastermind cohorts that I run to train partner managers, if you were to ask me, hey, like, what's the number one thing I've got to get right if I'm going to be really successful in building a partner program? To me, the answer is simply who you decide to partner with, right? Which implies how many partners you choose to work with, but meaning the partners that you want to invest in and choose to invest in is going to have the biggest impact on your success or failure, right? So it seems like you're in that same camp. So let's double down there. How do you start drawing the line on who to actually invest in, right? Like, hell yes or hell no. Like, what does that kind of, filtering approach look like for you, especially now in a position where you are a bigger fish, right? Everyone wants to work with the Domains of the world, which sounds great, but it also can be challenging because you get inundated with so much noise. So how do you personally draw a line of like, yeah, this is something that we can consider working with and then ultimately do, or you know what, that's not a good fit for us right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, especially as we've continued to grow, it's the inbox on whether it's LinkedIn,
I can
email,
imagine.
personal lines. I've gotten inundated, but we make it work. But ultimately, I think for me personally, I'm a really big believer in just like clear qualification criteria. I think that I can kind of point again, so it's not a personal of like, oh, I already have X partner in your category, I don't need any more. That's never the case, and I never want to come across that way either. But I think coming up with a clear like criteria in terms of like, firstly, why do you want to partner Domain? Yes, we have some big logos. We obviously have a big book of business being a larger agency, but what is the value that you're going to bring to like my team, just our like delivery team in general, our clients, and what makes you a differentiator than the client, than the I guess like other partners that we already work with in your space as well too. Like ultimately I do try to run from a fairly agnostic point of view. Like we're never just going to have, one partner for email, one partner for search and merchandising. But I think having like a core group that we could pick from. So we are always open to, looking for new partners and finding new partners. But I think we need to be very strategic about it. So clear qualifications, I think also around just the technology. Firstly, is the tech good? Does it work? Does our team like working with it? Is there really good support for our clients and our team as well too? And again, do we have like a shared ICP in terms of the type of business we're going after? Do we already have shared clients in place? I think it's always like a very easy place to go into. I think ultimately now the place we're in, I do find myself really prioritizing people who come to the board with, hey, we're already working with X client of yours, or we know we're in the deal cycle with X prospect that we know Domaine is also in as well too. That to me is so much faster to get the ball rolling versus maybe coming in like, hey, I'll give you X amount of rev share or whatever else, and why don't you want to work with us?
Yeah. That's so 2019.
Yes.
Love that. And I totally agree with that. We're going to double click a little bit later on about more about your kind of your preferred approach, so to speak, to initiating these partnerships. One quick question I wanted to drill down on in terms of prioritizing partners is the challenge of saying no, right? And so as a partnership professional, I see it all the time with ICs and senior ICs that come through my programs. You feel, for whatever reason, you feel the need that every single partner that comes into your proximity or applies, you just have to make work. It's almost like that's your job, like you're some type of ticketing help desk. So help the audience feel a little bit more comfortable by sharing a bit of your journey of the challenge of saying no, especially as Domaine's brand starts to skyrocket and everyone wants to work with you. Inevitably, you have to either deprioritize or just flat out say, I'm sorry, based on XYZ evidence, it doesn't seem like there's enough there to even invest starting, let alone scaling the partnership. So what's your own evolution been like of having that backbone ultimately to push back, either say no up front or for a failing partnership to actually have a tough conversation? So, you know what, we need to deprioritize you. Because this is one of the most critical skills, but it's really hard to develop.
Yes, it really is. And I think I had to go through a lot of like trial and error personally. I think also naturally people who end up in a partnership role, like you're people, like
Right.
you,
Yeah.
you know, you like working
Good
with
point.
people, you want to be liked as well too. So it can be hard to be, more of the hard line no, and having that backbone, exactly like you said. I think for myself, I actually have created like a template that I like. There's basically like three kind of things I'll like kind of check against. And if it doesn't hit that, I'll be very transparent as to why, whether it's essentially the technology, the need, like especially maybe recently, like this morning, I saw a request come in. It's a very niche specific type of like marketing technology where as an agency who doesn't really have marketing services in like the paid media space, I can't really see a fit. So I'm just very honest, like, hey, this doesn't kind of really meet this criteria. I'm sure your tech is great. If it ever comes up, I will be back in touch. But in the meantime, where we are today, it just doesn't make sense. I think also leveraging that a no today doesn't mean a no forever. Our ecosystem changes so quickly. Like our agency has changed dramatically in the past 12 months. So it's opened up new opportunities. It's maybe closed the door on others. So I think we're remaining flexible, and I like to remain honest in that as well too.
Yeah, that's a great approach. And anyone listening who's struggling to have these tough conversations with partners, and make no mistake, it is one of the most challenging conversations you can have, especially with an existing partner that you might have to deprioritize. Karolina is giving us a great blueprint, which is, be honest. And I see it as a strength. Like I've been told that before on the other end, where I've applied to a partner program and they're like, hey, like based on the information, doesn't seem like a great fit. It actually makes me respect that company more because it shows me that they don't waste time and they really are protective of the resources. And any company that you would want to work with long term should have no problem accepting that if you deliver it the right way. So that's just a really good masterclass to help some of you kind of overcome that challenge. Cool. Now we're going to flip the switch and we're going to start to talk about some things that really started to take off for you at Domaine to help build the program up. One thing that I really liked was pulling partners in through internal teams, right? In our prep, you talked a lot about how important operationalizing internal enablement was. So in terms of the behind the scenes internal plays that drive real results for you and your team at Domain, what does that actually look like in your world?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me in my world, it really looks at it's everything that happens, let's say, after that initial partnership handshake of like, you and I have chatted, we're like, there's definitely value here. We want to work together. But now it's really making sure that our internal teams, so share delivery and solutions teams, really know, like anyone client facing, really, actually, but know how and when to bring that partner into the conversation. And why as well too. So I think in my role that can look at like we have an internal like sort of database and directory of partners. We run a lot of enablement sessions, whether broader for our entire company that it's open to, or really more focused on whether it's AMs or AEs or like solutions teams as well too. And I even like building out really good case studies that are not even just public facing, but are used internally around like, hey, this partner was able to help solve this specific problem that we have seen come up multiple times that maybe our other partners weren't able to. So like if we are seeing climate that has X problem, we should probably look to pull in this partner. So I think it's really making sure our team isn't just guessing. There's a whole slew of partners in every category. So I think really kind of being able to match the when to recommend and why to recommend. So really knowing who to go to, what to say, and like how to sell it together.
Yeah, and that really is the crux of it from an internal enablement perspective, especially in these BD commercial relationships where the expectation is that both sides are driving, tangible pipeline, quality revenue, market expansion towards one another. So that really is the crux of it, and we'll dive into it more. And so specifically in our prep, you talked about this apps workshop, SOP, and partner discovery workflow, so to speak, that's been successful for you. So how does that actually run inside Domain?
Yeah, absolutely. So our apps workshop is really one of our like first steps once we're kicking off discovery with a new client. And so I worked very closely with our delivery and solution leadership to make sure they're tapping in and including partnerships in those conversations. So this initial meeting, typically either myself or some of my team will always be on this call, which is with our project team and the client, where we really walk through their tech stack and talk about, what they're happy with, what's broken, like what's missing, what are they looking to replace. And from there, it really helps identify opportunities to pull in partners. And it's so incredibly valuable to actually hear it from the client directly, especially for myself, who is not super client facing in a partnerships role, hearing, why they like certain partners, why they don't like other partners. I mean, to me, that's always the most valuable of I might like a certain partner, but if our clients don't like them, it's never going to work either. So that's really helpful. And I guess really from there, then that kind of feeds into our like internal partner discovery workflow, where we then align internally between the main stakeholders from the like internal project delivery teams on helping to find like where we can fill those like tech gaps that are solved by partners or ecosystem. And I think kind of also mapping out as well too, where, if price is a major concern, helping to map out maybe which of our partners are a bit more like I guess like price friendly or more budget friendly, I guess is maybe the right word. Or if they're looking for something very specific from a tech perspective, who can actually solve that versus who would maybe need to do a bit more custom. And then really from there, once we kind of identify those and everyone's happy, ultimately loop in those partners like for really tailored solutioning as early as possible and really helping kick off those co-selling conversations as early as we can as well too.
Yeah, I mean, that was a fantastic breakdown of how surfacing opportunities for your partners, but also helping solve customer problems should happen, which is literally talk to your customers and ask them. It's kind of sounds silly to say like that on this conversation, but it's amazing how flawed 95% of these activities actually get run. And I was guilty of it myself when I was earlier in my career, which is you do these account mapping exercises and tools like Crossbeam, you get your client list, you pick them out, and it's like the partnerships teams on both sides are just seemingly determining what your customers need, right? It's like, oh, I want that logo. So by definition, they must want my solution or my service. So you're giving us a blueprint of how it actually should work, which I love to see, which is actually ask your customers. And so if I could ask you one more point blank question, just because I know it would be so valuable for people to hear from someone like yourself from Domain, can you help us understand how a real referral gets surfaced? Like you just gave us a pretty high level view of it, but walk us through the day in the life of like a global agency. Let's just pick any partner, the Klaviyo's of the world. Let's just say you just referred them a really warm introduction that looks promising for both sides, the customer and Klaviyo. Like what really happens step by step? Because I think there's so much confusion in the market of how this happens, where someone at Klaviyo or someone whoever at another ISV just wants an intro to one of your accounts, so they ping you and then you just go knock on your customer's door and then voila, that intro gets made, which is obviously not how it happens. So I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, how does an actual referral get surfaced within the confines of a pretty complex word like Domain? Nothing
Yeah.
proprietary, just kind of high level of how that really works.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think there can definitely be a couple of different tracks and ways this comes up, whether like from our like long-term existing retainer clients or someone who's like
Right.
net new and in discovery, or and like that's either flagged from our team or the partner themselves too. But I think I've even had times where like a partner has actually been surfaced of like, hey, we're getting very high intense signals from one of your clients, like whether they're visiting the website or they like already, they've reached out in some way, shape, or form through marketing material. Is there, an opportunity for us to chat? So this actually happened recently with one of our partners. And then we actually ended up scheduling a call with like AM and another strategist on our team as well too, who did say like, hey, we were actually recently speaking about this type of technology. Let's think like, what is kind of the gap you can fill for them, and like we can kind of help share where this lies in their like roadmap, and what exactly is important to them specifically. Again, whether it's budget, timeline, technology, whatever else that looks like. And from there, and this conversation actually had started a while ago because I think the account manager was able to share like, hey, this is maybe not a priority for Q2, but this is going to be a very high priority for Q3. So again, we can kind of also like be very honest, manage expectations. Like these things don't necessarily develop overnight. Sometimes they do, most often they don't. And then from there, I think we actually had a lot of really strong back channeling between our team and the partner team around sort of like what the conversation was going to look like, priorities. Yeah. And then from the warm intro, it's moved very quickly because I think we did have a lot of alignment. We did kind of, people were patient as well too. And I think built trust just between our team and the partner team as well too. So by the time the client was involved, I think everyone was really happy to kind of like let the ball get rolling from there.
Yeah, I love that phased approach. I especially loved like the setting expectations properly. And one of the most valuable enablement activities that I've run, and curious if it's something that you've ever done as well, is like the people who actually make referrals are client facing, to use your phrase. People in account management, AE, CSM, client specialists, etc. Those are the people who actually make the referrals. And so I think it's really important for a partner manager on one side, say at an ISV partner of yours, to like really get to meet some of the reps on your side, not to chase referrals, but like literally understand the day in their life, because you'll have a deeper appreciation for their constraints, their challenges. As an example, you just want your clients happy with Domaine, period. Right? And it's hard enough to get a response from them for most times, even if you're crushing it for them. So it's a really awkward thing sometimes to like insert, a talk track where you're trying to like recommend another vendor, another ISV. So my point here is I think there's so much value in understanding the actual day in the life and the role of these people who are in these critical customer facing roles as a partner manager type role. So you can have a deeper empathy, but also tailor your approach to be more respectful and strategic when approaching those type of roles. Curious if that's something that resonates with you.
100%. Yes, absolutely. I think it can be such a fine line where I think sometimes from a tech partner perspective, I think people forget that if we as an agency are making a recommendation for like your specific technology, like like we are kind of putting ourselves sometimes in a bit of an awkward place, like, hey, have you thought about, X, Y, or Z? And then also it's a lot of risk for the agency because if the recommendation is then poorly received or then the tech partner like drops the ball, whether during sales or delivery, implementation, whatever it looks like, it looks badly on us as an agency because we're obviously such a trusted partner of the client. We're so ingrained in so many different parts of like their obviously like their website and their e-com experience. So yeah, we can easily burn trust by making really poor recommendations as well too. So for us, we need to make sure it's like so well vetted and we're very comfortable. So I think building those strong relationships across those teams, like you mentioned, is very valuable. And emphasis on relationship building versus just trying to hound different areas for leads. If I don't have leads for you, I promise our account management team is not just all of a sudden going to have leads for you either. It's a very joint effort. We work very cross-functionally across teams. So, and then I hate having to play bodyguard for other teams too. I'm like, I would love people to have the direct relationships, but again, be very respectful at the end of the day too, right?
Yeah, love it. And look, anyone listening, like you're literally being given the blueprint for how to like approach like a crawl, walk, run relationship with the folks at Domaine. So there's no excuses if you're listening to this to not really level up. But it's no different than recommending someone or giving an endorsement or reference letter for someone for a job, right? But the difference here is the stakes are even higher, right? If you give a really poor recommendation to a vendor, you might lose a 6-figure client, right? So like the stakes are quite high when it comes to recommendations. So people have to have that respect. Cool. Love that chapter. We're going to fast forward now into, okay, you're really strong on internal enablement and powering your partners. Now let's talk about how you can monetize and start leveraging that success to drive revenue back towards Domaine. So specifically, what's your actual framework or mental model for turning agency partnerships into revenue, right? So you don't have to give anything proprietary or sensitive, but ultimately speaking, you're delivering great outcomes for your clients. You're delivering a ton of value to your partners, which then you've now earned the right to kind of capitalize on those to try to drive business towards you and your program. So what's your TLDR on how you approach that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess at a high level, I mean, like ultimately, again, always boil it back to like making sure there's like a really good client fit. And then I think from there, I find it's been very valuable to actually enable our like partners teams too, whether it's like AEs, CSMs, whatever makes the most sense so that they, can essentially almost like a bit of a part of like our sales team at Domain as well too. So it's also that relationship building from Domain to the partner. I think when we see very like high potential there as well too. And then obviously moving into very intentional co-selling, whether it's like our mapped accounts, I think like going through like joint pitches, especially if we know we're in the same opportunities. And I think getting very in the weeds in the strategy of how do we work together? How do we position ourselves as like an offering together? Do we have obviously like existing case studies or stories we can tell of like how we've worked together, how we win, if someone is using X technology plus domain, how does that level up the experience and sort of so on from there. And then I think ultimately, obviously, tracking everything I think is so wildly important. So whether that's like referrals, influence, just like the velocity of the referrals as well too. I think what's working, what's not working. Obviously the co-marketing side too, but ultimately have all the data in front of you so that you can then from there, as you're kind of getting ramped up, optimize what's actually working.
Got it. Now let's drill down. That's all great. Let's drill down on one of your core specialties, which is enablement, but keeping on the topic of external enablement, like really activating and evangelizing the customer facing reps on the partner side that you're ultimately trying to surface qualified ops from, because at the end of the day, that's what we're held accountable to. In my experience, candidly, having worked at several ISVs in the e-commerce space, where I'm personally, as a leader of the department, responsible for activating our customer facing teams to refer to our ISV and our agency partners. In my experience, it's always proven to be more challenging to surface quality referrals for agency partners than it is for tech partners. And I found actually one of the biggest reasons why is that the CSMs or AEs that I'm trying to enable in my company, they seemingly more readily understand what ISVs do, like what does Klaviyo do, what does Recharge do, versus they don't have as much built-in understanding and knowledge of what an agency does, let alone who the specific agencies are. So the specific question for you is, has that rung true for you when it comes to enabling your ISV partner customer-facing reps? Is there some gap where it's like, oh boy, I got to take a step back and educate them on what an agency is and what a service-based agency is and what we specifically do at Domain and which segment of their customers are relevant to us? Curious if that rings a bell for you, because I've certainly had a harder time, candidly, activating my internal teams to refer to agencies than I have for ISVs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the most common scenario. And I think we've gone through a lot of trial and error in this. I think we've also, I think, had to take a step back too of like, we're not going to just try and enable every single one of our partners. I think we have to look at the partners where I think there is the most obvious opportunity or overlap, whether it's also another partner who is, targeting migrations from another platform to Shopify, which is something we do a lot of, or depending where they tend to sit sometimes also, and when they're getting spoken to by like our prospects. So are they a type of technology that a prospect is seeking out, especially when considering a migration or a larger redesign project versus something that maybe is like being added on to as in an ongoing retainer or sort of phase two. So I think that's first and foremost of like, we kind of had to focus on who makes the most sense, regardless of how much we like that technology or partner. But then I think to really boil it down, yeah, we have to learn. I think I can run through the whole, fluffy marketing presentation of like, here's Domain, here's where we're the best, so on and so forth. I think kind of almost boiling that down into like 3 like really key snappy takeaways of here's what we're good at and here's when you should recommend us, because it's not going to be everything. So again, similarly, the same way I don't want to make the mistake of recommending out our clients' technologies where maybe it's not going to be the right fit and it's going to cause problems. I want to avoid that happening to our like ISV partners as well too, because again, I don't want to like cause extra friction to that relationship where Domain has dropped the ball or not done such a good job on whatever the project there was they referred to us. So I think there's first that, and then I think past that as well to kind of like once we've enabled, how is like Domain going to help that team specifically? Like, what is the value add to bringing an agency? I think sometimes in speaking to AEs, they sometimes see it bringing an agency that maybe it will slow down the deal or cause extra friction or whatnot. So I think kind of
Take away
helping
from
show
budget.
exactly. There's so many things like that where I think they can see it more as the hindrance. So I think really streamlining the communication, like presenting as to like the how we'll actually help that deal cycle, how we'll make it faster, how we can make that a better deal. We can also help upsell, cross-sell extra functionality from our work experience together to whatnot as well too. But again, also how are we going to make their lives easier? So it's kind of just like flipped on its head a little bit.
Yeah, I love that. Again, a great SOP for how to actually approach this. And I'm big on, I'm not trying to activate the entire customer facing team on that one partner side. Like, can I start with one person who just gets it and feels what it looks like to win by partnering with Domain? And I can promise the audience, like once you have a partner really help AE or CSM or account manager win, whatever that looks like, they will just keep pressing that button. And one of the things that absolutely crystallized this for me was I had the privilege of attending a retail burst kickoff event for Shopify at their Toronto office. a year ago, and there was another agency there, and there was about 50 of the sales reps for the retail team, and they were just like, it was like a cult. Like, they absolutely love this one particular boutique agency. They were going crazy for them and just standing up, speaking so highly of this agency. I'm like, holy cow! Like, everyone in this room is like a champion of this specific agency for the retail use case. And I was like, that's the goal. Like, you need to like have these people become heroes. It takes years to get to that point, but you really need to start with one individual on the other side as a seed crystal, so to speak. And if you nail it with them, they're going to keep using you, but they're going to tell their buddies internally, like, hey, Domaine really just helped me save this huge deal that I was about to lose, or Domaine just helped me close this huge deal by co-selling with me together. So does that resonate with you? Just like, just keeping it simple and start with one person who just gets it and can win by working with you, and then start to apply that across the team.
Absolutely. No, you totally nailed it. That's really what we've done as well too, where it's like, yes, even if we have these larger like enablement sessions where we kind of walk through, we talk about a high level, our actual relationship building has typically been on a one-to-one level. And I agree, it's always typically like one AE who our partner will actually work to almost assign to like the domain account of like, all right, we're going to co-sell together, or one CSM where we're going to also like help co-sell into their accounts or upsell, cross-sell, whatever else that looks like. And again, it's once we have like those one or two wins, that person has always become our biggest champion. And then that has rolled into just other opportunities across the team as well too. Even if we don't end up working with other people on such a one-to-one basis, having that relationship has always been very beneficial and continue to grow to ultimately we're talking about ideally you have a room of 50 champions for your company.
Love that. Love that. Sweet. And now, speaking of another topic that I know you're really passionate about, metrics, and you kind of hinted at earlier on where mistakes you can make are just obsessing over one metric like close one revenue, which is very lagging. Doesn't really tell you so much on the short term. So beyond just source deals, what metrics are you personally looking at to tell if a partner motion is working?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've also set up metrics, again, the same vein amount around like influenced sort of like revenue as well
Right.
too. So we have different metrics for, let's say, if a partner is able to help point out of like, hey, we have intel that we know this brand is looking to migrate to Shopify. That's already such incredibly intel for like valuable intel for us as an agency where now we can start using our biz dev team to like outbound and prospect. And then if that translate, I have like our team is great. I have the support of CRO as well too in terms of assigning some sort of influenced revenue to that partner as well too for helping kick off that conversation. Even if they weren't a place to actually help make like a warm introduction, that intel sharing is still wildly valuable. So we kind of consider that influenced revenue. I think also just like the volume of leads is something I look at where a partner, even if they're trying, even if it doesn't actually translate, I think that's important. You do have to look at the why is it not translating? Again, if it's like a misalignment or whatnot. So I do still look at close rates around this as well too. But I think the intent of like sharing leads both ways, especially if there's like a notable volume, is definitely like I think worth looking at and important to look at. Ultimately, like what does engagement look like between our AE and CSM teams as well too? Like, is there that close alignment we were just speaking about as well too? Do we have anyone who's like really kind of helping champion or really leaning into the relationship aside from just the partner manager? I think that's always a really good tell as well too. Our co-marketing is something that I like to look at as well too. I mean, yes, dollar spend is always great, but it's very easy sometimes to like throw money at something and not have it translate. So I think also the co-marketing dollar spend, yes, but also is the partner then really helpful in actually driving like sales qualified leads, whether it's like through events, in person, webinars, whatever else that looks like. And last thing I always like to look at and track is like shared client happiness. So if we have a big roster of clients together, but I am constantly getting like, pinged in I guess escalations of things that are
Bad
not going
news.
well, exactly. It's going to be much harder to send new business either way, realistically. So
Yeah, I love that. It sounds like you have a very kind of holistic view and assessment methodology for understanding the dynamics of any given partnership. One thing I was really pleased to hear in that statement was just around partner influence and giving due credit to that. And that's been a wildly polarizing topic on all of our
mhm.
episodes so far. But we said one thing that gave me a lot of confidence, which was like CRO backed, right? Because what I typically see is that someone like ourselves, like partnership leader type folks, will like kind of create the SOP for influence, and then they'll be running it. But then the leadership levels, they're like, well, we're not acknowledging that. Like, cool, you're calling that influence, but like, we didn't give it our stamp of approval. So the last quick question to wrap this one up is, for something as polarizing as influence, where it's a little bit murkier, right? It's not as clear and measurable as something like a new lead or a new deal that closed, but it's still nonetheless really important. What was the internal approval or endorsement process like for something as murky, but also really important element like influence, and making sure that that's considered when kind of stack ranking and prioritizing partners to place bets on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it definitely wasn't just like an overnight
Of
conversation we
course.
had. It definitely took some time. I think I am also very lucky where our CRO, sorry, has a partnerships background as well too. So I
Super
think more
helpful.
so maybe than some other execs, like he gets it, which has been very helpful and valuable for me and my team as well too. But I think aside from that as well too, like we did also set up some like very clear rules of engagement between like sales, marketing, and like our biz dev team as well too. So like we can kind of like there's guardrails in place. Like I do still get the odd, let's say, text here and there of like, oh yeah, I definitely recommend a domain for this deal. Like they're definitely gonna reach out. And I'm like, that's very vague. I have no way of actually validating that. I appreciate the thought, but I'm never gonna get that approved. But I think again, where it's like almost more of an intel sharing, I think it's very valuable. Of like, hey, I know this brand is, looking for XYZ. Here are the things that are important to them. Like, even if I can't make their direct intro, like feel free to like try and reach out through your own outbounding. And then if that translates based on the intel we have, like that's so immensely valuable. And that is something that we only get through, pretty intense like relationship building. You're not just going to offer up that information to, any person you meet in the industry. So I think again, having a bit more clear guardrails in place has made that a bit easier to sell internally as well.
Love that. Love that. And great segue into the final section here where we're going to just drill down on a earlier topic, which is partner prioritization, which is a topic near and dear to my heart. And it's one of the most important elements to get right in building a program. So I mentioned earlier kind of this concept of the burden of being the big fish, right? Sometimes if you're the small fish, there's challenges of that, meaning your company in relation to the partner company, you're just a smaller company, smaller brand in the market. Domain now, by all accounts, is the biggest fish in the market. You really are that marquee partner for almost every ISV in Shopify's orbit. So the first question for you here is, how do you filter? Like, it's a really good problem to have, right? Where everyone wants to work with you. Everyone is going to give you their best shot, so to speak, and sell you on the moon. So how do you ultimately filter that to make sure that you don't get duped into prioritizing, wasting months and really precious resources on partners that ultimately were just a lot of noise?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for myself, my team, I think we've had to learn to become like really ruthless around our focus, quite frankly. Yeah, like we were talking about, you can't work with everyone. So I think really prioritizing on like that client demand first and foremost. So like where do we actually maybe see opportunity or need support from other ISVs? What is the clear differentiation first and foremost too? And I think also from the partner side, like is their team actually going to like show up and build like with us and like really lean in versus are they just reaching out, they just want leads or they just want to slap our logo on their website or have their logo on ours, vice versa. I think like showing that very like clear intent, like clear also like research and understanding of like who Domain is very helpful. But from our side as well too, very clear ICP alignment and a clear need as well too.
Love that. And the follow-up question, and this will be great listening material for anyone tuning in, is if you think back to the last time you had a really positive response and ultimately responded to a cold DM, cold turkey, LinkedIn DM, or cold email, where you're like, wow, like this one got me. Like this was a really great email. They did their homework. This is clearly tailored, not just cookie cutter AI, right? You don't have to share what the example was, but what was it about that approach? Like what works for you specifically, right? In terms of cold outreach, which you get inundated with all the time now, what really works from an elements perspective?
I think like you were just poking to, like being very personalized and specific and like value forward, like really showing me that I think you've done the research. Like where do I sit in the org as well too? I've gotten some people reach out and they I think are from their boilerplate templates think I'm in sales or in marketing, and I was like,
Right.
oh, I don't think you're the
Brutal.
right person for what you're looking for. But also like have a clear understanding like of our agency as well too. I have seen every different type of outreach and some of them are so bizarre to me. So I think when someone does seem like they're very focused and personalized, it very helps. I think even just around like leading with like, do we have mutual clients or like, are we, in any RFPs together as well too? I think like really like leading with those like mutual wins, overlaps, like ICP and not just sending me your deck. For me personally, I'm so much more likely to lean in.
Yeah, love that. And look, as I said, anyone here who wants to partner with Domain now or one day, there's no excuses because you're getting the blueprint here live with us. The one thing I loved about the last bit of what you said is, do we have mutual customers? Is there someone in RFP that we can support with or get support on? What I love about that is like that's how you get like momentum and urgency like right away, right? It's exhausting when you get applications from net new partners because you're like, oh, I got to start from ground zero. But if they're reaching out to you hot and they're giving you really important context that shows you it's like, oh, you know what? Getting started with this potential new partner won't be as challenging as we thought because there's already some traction there by however means. I think that's a really valuable place to start. That clearly works for you and probably works for a lot of other people as well.
Absolutely.
Sweet. Cool. Last question, then we're going to wrap up here is what's one bold idea partner pros need to embrace if they want to win in the next 12 months?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think for me, I would say to really like stop treating partnerships, it's like some sort of checkbox on a list of things you have to do. Like I booked a meeting with Domain, great. But I think more start treating it almost like a bit more like a product, quite frankly, where we're not just signing and forgetting about it. I think you said that's a very 2019 era. I think we should be long past that. We're really like no one cares how many logos you've lined up if you can't actually show impact. I think the real partner leaders over the next 12 months are going to build a little bit more like product managers, I think, with like really clear ICP, like really clear go to market strategy, internal enablement, like retention, all the things you really need to like launch a product essentially. Where, if you wouldn't launch that without a plan to grow and support it, like why would you do that with a partnership as well, too?
Yeah,
To be focused.
I absolutely love that. We had Rob Moyer, head of GTM partnerships at Gong, talk a lot about how he likes to build his programs exactly like a product. Like, how are you going to drive usage? How are you going to measure success? What's stakeholder management look like? What's the ultimate goal in the first place? So I'm totally with you there. I think those who can't keep up and index on proving impact and scaling a business unit that way, I think candidly are going to get left behind. So you've heard it here first. So hopefully this is helpful. But look, this was a fantastic conversation. I honestly picked up so much myself, and I know our audience did. So thank you so much for tuning in, and thanks for joining us.
Likewise. Thanks so much.
All right, cool. We'll see us next time on the Partnership Mastermind podcast.